So quiet. Oh, yeah.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and members Ball and Drop, staff and guests. The lobbies are open and the recording has begun.
Thank you. Okay, we'll convene the executive management team meeting for Wednesday, November 13th, 2024. Our first report come from Mark Webster, our legislative affairs director.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and board member Bollendroff. The November election kicked off a series of changes that I think we're all still figuring out how they'll impact us. What we know as of today is the Democrats retain their hold on statewide offices. Incoming Governor Bob Ferguson, Attorney General Nick Brown, and Secretary of State Steve Hobbs. You can add the Insurance Commissioner Patty Cooterer. They appear to be increasing their margin in the Senate, potentially gaining a 30th seat through Adrian Cortez's narrow lead in the redistricted 18th, the seat that was once held by Ann Rivers. Senator Mazzol, a top target for Democrats, does have a lead to retain a 10th. Cortez margin is only like 200 votes, but Mazzol is now about 2,000. Wow. The redistricted seat in the Yakima Valley, drawn after a court challenge, didn't result in changes. Senator King, who had to move to stay within it, won re-election. Sorry. Well, we will see a new Senate Majority Leader in Jamie Peterson, and we'll soon see about the staff of the new incoming governor. We have seen his initial transition team, a group that includes some Olympia vets, many of the advocates and stakeholders we work with, and a name familiar to all here, Board Member Garrett. In December, we're going to get to see what the legislature does with our policy committees. There's the potential for a big shakeup in one or both, with the legislature changing the subject areas for the policy committees overseeing alcohol and cannabis. The current policy committees were created for the 2023 sessions as new, more narrowly focused committees. Regulated Substances and Gaming was broken off from the old Commerce and Gaming Committee, and Labor and Commerce in the Senate previously also dealt with tribal affairs. So we'll see if they stay narrow or if they might roll one or both back into committees with a larger book of business. And we'll also get to see who will be on those committees in December. Before the current administration heads out, they have given us a task. OFM just sent agencies a letter requesting budget cuts to cover substantial near general fund state whole budget deficit, particularly in the out years.
Proposed. We should say an exercise.
Exactly. It's an exercise.
Yeah. Just to be clear.
And again, we are not an agency that has a lot of general fund state or doesn't get much of its funding from that source or other funds subject to the outlook, but we are included in this exercise all the same. So there's more to come on this. Just want to make sure that everyone's aware of it. We do hope to hear from the current administration on our agency request proposals too. And I do want to flag that we've been asked to make a very minor change to the medical cannabis excise tax exemption bill. That shouldn't be a very big deal. We are removing the change of where the fine revenue, the account that is deposited into. You had a question about that when we were talking about it. Very minor change. It's possible that OFM will make that change in like an omnibus accounts bill, but it'll be removed from ours, so ours stays within our fairly narrow title. Okay, so more to come on that as well. Before any of that, though, I think our attention is now focused on a presentation that we've been asked to give to the House Regulated Substances and Gaming Committee. That is on December 10th, and the focus is really the Social Equity in Cannabis program. I'm going to be meeting with the Department of Commerce. Commerce is also going to be presenting along with us, and they've also asked us to kind of work with the Office of Equity as we kind of develop some of those materials for December 10th. And that's what I've got for now. Any questions?
I wonder if increasing the number of Democrats in the House.
Yeah, they picked up one in the 26th as well.
Will lean toward them needing more committee positions than less.
Could be staying narrow is the way. Yeah.
You got to keep everybody busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see within a month.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Jim, any questions for Mark?
No questions. Thank you, Mark.
Great. Next up is Becky Smith for an update on licensing.
Well, good afternoon, Chairperson and Board Member Vollendraw. I'm going to start with our strategic planning and industry meeting updates. because that we've had a lot of work going on in licensing. We're actually actively working on our action plans for our agency strategic plan. One of those items has been engaging with the industry representatives. It's been it's been a great group to meet with. We've met with both retail and non-retail. The discussions are very intentional, that we gather a perspective and an understanding on different topics, areas for liquor licensing, that the group, for instance, we have discussed topics that included trends, best practice, barriers, and industry needs as well. That very small groups for both retail and non-retail, that it is just with licensing at this point for these two groups, that the first meeting was held on October 9th, and that was for a non-retail group. And the meeting for the retail group was on October 9th, so the day after. It was interesting that both of these groups had a lot of common areas, common topics that they wanted to discuss. We had 10 action items that we walked away with that we wanted to be able to address in the short term, so sort of low-hanging fruit. And then areas that are going to take a bit longer, and we're going to need to pull in some help from our policy rules folks and of course our enforcement partners. But some of the items that we're discussing are shared spaces. This morning I met with the research team to have this discussion with them as well, to find out what's happening in other states that are shared spaces, something that everybody's doing for liquor, for retail and non-retail, and if so, are there concerns that we're also providing some guidance for temporary licenses for outside service areas. So we'll be sharing that information in the upcoming newsletter. Some of the information that they requested were things that we had already done. So for us, it was just a matter of just reminders, sending reminders out there. That special permits for wineries and breweries and distilleries. This was a collaboration that we did with enforcement. Again, that it's getting everyone from our agency on the same page. So make sure that what we're communicating out to the industry, no matter if it's license and enforcement, is the same. And so very proud of the work that we're doing there. And then business licensing services, we've heard a lot of complaints and about how long it's taking for and actually a lot of delays when it comes to change in ownership structure. That staff met with business and licensing services, and it's gone from being a month out to a week. And now we're meeting with them every week, and they're sharing with us where they are as far as getting those applications completed. So again, really good work. We have a lot more to do. That's just a couple of things that we talked about, but a good start. And we'll be meeting with them and sending them out, and as well as to the board, of course, those 10 topic areas, and then what licensing and what the agency has done to address some of their concerns. And that low-hanging fruit for some of them, and others it'll be a longer conversation like the shared spaces. Jim?
Thanks for the update, Becky. I was just curious about the participation by non-retailers and retail folks. Were those open invitation, or how were people selected to participate in these meetings?
Yeah, great question. We selected the folks that we hear most from our licensing staff. So people that make phone calls in, that have questions, that are submitting rule requests or changes in our policy. So that's how we decided who would be invited to this first group. I know that other folks are interested. We heard from the industry that they would like other people to join the group. So we'll be opening that up as well. So the next is for sports and entertainment facility work group. That happened on November 4th, and a big thanks to board member Vollendroff. This has been something that I know that he's been passionate about when it comes to best practice. So that that we looked at a couple of different things that we invited representatives from Lumen Field, T-Mobile, Climate Pledge, Tacoma Dome, and licensing staff, as well as staff from the board, the director's office, enforcement education, public health, and the research team. Big group. It was a lively discussion that it was, a discussion around consumption of spirits and general seating. That the meeting was also helpful for, and definitely it was helpful for me to understand what those facilities are currently doing and offering, as well as that we want to make sure that any changes or any recommendations that we make to the board are done, that it's just not a recommendation, but done with data and considering public health's what public health thinks as well. So next steps for licensing is that we're going to be working on with this group, some best practice standards. And also next steps would be getting some type of a white paper that discusses some of these changes that they're asking for, so we can get input from the board as a direction. Questions before I move on? And then I also wanted to mention the product and packaging label group that we've been doing as well. We've put together a review committee that includes, again, representatives from licensing, enforcement, and public health. The work group is really focusing on cannabis and alcohol products and packaging for labels. We want to make sure that we had just one person doing all those reviews. And we've spoken about that many times with board members and in different conversations with folks. But this is a bigger team. It really gives us some different perspectives that are sitting around the table. So far, we've already met one time. The team has met on October 1st. And they'll be meeting again. We're also looking at ways to lean the process. So the process can be cumbersome at times, and we want to make sure that there's a way for us to process these labels quicker, but also with more eyes on them as well. Along with that, we've also added an additional member to that team, a new licensing specialist that's going to be assisting in the review. And then one last thing I want to mention is that we have a new rule ideal process. Our Desiree Monroe.
We just lost you back.
Oh, can you hear me
You
now?
froze right after you said Desiree's name. So if you could start again there, that'd be great.
Sure. So our new policy and education manager, Desiree Monroe, she's implemented a new process to help formally capture and evaluate ideas from staff for rule changes and additional appeals for a process that we're going to be taking a look at these from our staff. So it really is, we want to make sure that staff are considering everything when they're not everything, but a lot more than just putting in, we'd like to change this rule, but really why, who does it affect? That are there other things that we need to consider? That we also want to, we'll be looking at that as a leadership team before submitting it to the bigger policy group. Again, to make sure that our staff are heard when it comes to changes, that they're excited about having a process internally just in licensing, and then knowing what the next steps are. So knowing that it just doesn't fall into this, they send it in and we don't do anything with it, but we'll be coming back with them, having conversations with them. And then if it's something that we prioritize, we're going to have a prioritizing it as well, moving it forward to the policy and policy team. So I think that's it for us. Any questions?
Great.
I have one quick question. So Becky, that last process that you talked about, maybe this is a question for Justin and you. Is this different than the process that Justin has been talking about? Or am I confusing two different things, or are they the same thing essentially?
It isn't the same. This is for licensing. This is just for licensing. And again, it's a way for us to help staff to conduct some research before they just put in a rule change. We want to make sure that they're outlining and answering questions for us, and then for us to be able to come back and have some internal conversations about those. We want to make sure that when you're putting in a rule change, that they're considering all the different, I'll just take liquor, for instance. Liquor, you put in a rule change, and sometimes it hits all these different chapters. And it's important for staff to go in and look at all those different chapters, kind of a helping our staff grow.
Would it then go through Justin's process or?
100%.
I
Yes.
see. I see. Okay.
Justin,
Yeah,
do you want to add?
Yeah, I see this as basically working together. So the division is establishing some requests. We're working on that request, intake request form. And so they'll be able to provide that. And one of the things I think that's helpful with what Becky's doing in her division is we already will have an understanding of how they prioritize from a division on what's important. So if we just open up a form to say, hey, anybody give us your ideas, then they're going to come from all over the place. We may not be able to be as responsive, but when you have a process like Becky is setting up, I think that's going to really pair nicely with the intake and how we want to determine prioritization on rules.
I love it. I think it's great. I wonder if we are I'm curious, are there other conversations happening within other sections so that we have a similar process happening in E&E and elsewhere, so that we've got some kind of consistency in the process?
Great point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Does that mean there's not at this point?
Oh, well, I don't know. Tony, Will, anybody else?
For us to look at and adopting what Becky's doing, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah, the answer is currently there aren't other divisions doing this. There are not other divisions doing this, but it sounds like something that could
I
be
just think it,
adaptable.
again, thinking of the process and setting things up and consistency, it would be at least worth a conversation. And if we don't choose to do it in a particular section, then, what's the reason why we wouldn't do something that sounds like a really nice process?
Right, I agree. Using the same format, using the same form, and then having the same information and analysis lead up to Justin's group makes the most logical sense. And seems like it would make it easier for Justin's group once the handoff occurs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll speak in a few moments around what we have on prioritization for rules right now, but it really speaks to that. So appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Moving on, enforcement education update with acting chief Paul Magro. Chief.
Afternoon, Chair Postman, Member Vollendroff. Sorry, afternoon, Chair Postman, Member Vollendroff. We're gonna get the slides, so thank you, Gretchen. I condensed the slides down from 300 to 4. So there's a slight adjustment. I'd like, next slide, please. I'd like to start with our updates and notable partnerships. This is gathered on a monthly basis. And it's not a direct reflection of all the partnerships that we do throughout the state, but it's a great example of what's going on. This is a carryover from September, and we've encouraged all the captains to get with their regions to collect this information and kind of identify the existing partnerships that we have. So some events in the meetings, they're regular. We want to ensure that we have visibility, ongoing communication, and continue to establish our ongoing partnerships. So this aids in our success. What I haven't seen a whole lot, and I'm encouraging, is our more of the community engagement piece with some of the coalitions that are out there. So the Prevent coalitions or Youth Access. I was involved in some coalitions earlier on, and we had, I think, success in our ongoing relationships with the community and schools that were brought on board. So I think it's a great idea. What was started here, I just like to ensure that we continue and identify the existing partnerships. Okay, next slide, please. And I got it down to under 25 minutes.
Great job.
Hiring and recruiting for October. So we have a current vacancy rate of 28. As of October, we had a vacancy rate of 28. That includes 21 officers, a captain, 2 lieutenants, a chemist. We have no problem right now filling the consultants, but I do want to identify that 2 of our lieutenants' positions have currently been filled. And we have a captain's interview going on this week. So we'll be down to 25 here in a second. We got the backgrounds for LEOs is 10 in the background currently. DC Rinke says it's looking pretty good, but the end result of the background is what it is. Anything could occur. 5 recruits currently in the academy. 2 of them are in Burien, and I'm sorry, 3 are in Burien and 2 are in Spokane. And we're pretty active in the job fairs, so we're trying to get staff out to ensure that we're engaged in continuous recruiting. We do JBLM. There's a White Center job fair that we're a part of, and then PST, the public safety testing. They host some of the job fairs, so we have 2 of those that we're currently engaged in the last month. For our compliance, youth access in fourth quarter, the numbers are fairly consistent with the previous quarter's numbers as we continue on as the compliance checks and youth access focus continue. With a delivery and curbside for pickup, that it seems to be a little cumbersome because a lot of the industry members, they're moving away from having a third party or their own staff deliver product. And what they're finding, especially with third party, is I guess the nexus with accountability. They feel like the businesses should not be accountable necessarily for an error or an omission on the delivery driver. So we continue to work with the businesses. Typically, what you see there's 4 that were conducted for that so far in the fourth quarter, and that's with over 15 scheduled. And it takes hours to schedule these because they have to go online. They have to find the business that has the delivery or the option to deliver or curbside. And then some of them are pulling away from it. Even the curbside, they pull you in to the what is it? Takeout. It's the takeout option. So we do have 4 funded positions for the delivery that is up for expiration in July of 2025. So we're really hoping that we can continue and ensure that we're a part of that. And those are 4 funded LEO positions. Okay, go to next slide, please.
A quick question before we move on, Paul.
Yes, sir.
We talked about this before, but since this is your first meeting in this capacity, I just want to point out that the liquor compliance rate is just not acceptable. And I know that there's ongoing conversation and work happening. A question I have about that is that 71% are the percentage of sales to minors typically in retail stores, or are they in bars and restaurants? Like where's the majority of those sales take place?
It's the retail stores. You're correct.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
again, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I'm looking forward to continuing to have conversations and Will, I'll follow up with you too on an individual basis and, talk about, where I find myself, looking at this month after month after month, and maybe it's just a lack of patience on my part, but, what actionable things can we do? Or do we have benchmarks and timeframes in which we hope to make some substantial progress in this area? But yeah, I just am not satisfied with that 71%.
And I agree, 71% is low. I think with the consultants out there providing a good piece of the education component, that we could look at a different avenue of availability for staff. And it's not that we're not available, it's just opportunities I think we're going to be a little bit more public with ensuring that there's more accessibility for the education components. And with the transition of the new the liquor civil penalties, that that again may impact that as well. So I think that we're on the right track, but this is a continued effort that we shouldn't pull away from because it is lower than usual.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And cannabis continues to hold high on their rate, and part of that is the security measures at the establishments. There's a lot of place holders that they utilize. They typically have somebody that's checking ID before they go in. They use an ID scanner. There's a lot of elements in place, and we see a lot of the education component that comes along with that. Okay, this is a hybrid slide, and I'm always open to change that. So I added educational contacts with our NTCs, warnings, and AVNs, kind of a all-in-one. It's a one and done. So we get the rabbit hole and distract from some of the detail that is there, but I want to make sure that we kind of touch base on it. So we do have some the totals for education contacts is a total of over 22,000 education contacts. The NTCs have increased a little bit, 814, and that's with the increased consultants. We have the consultants currently working on the beer and wine missing tax reports. That did impact the fourth quarter. If you look at the liquor portion, I'm sorry, the third quarter, the liquor portion, there's a lot of NTCs that were written for the missing beer and wine tax reports, and that's directly attributed to the consultants' work on that. And typically, if they're not responding to the NTCs, then we get the progressive penalties, which is the warning to AVN. On the education, if looking at the education hours with the 22,000 education contacts, and that's for the calendar year, the 4,000 hours is about it's over 520 8-hour days. That's what it boils down to. And this month alone, we're at about 345 hours of the education contacts, which is about 43 8-hour days. So there's a continued effort and focus that we get out and continue to provide that education. And I think we can be creative and ensure that we continue to reach out to the liquor side, the liquor industry. It just seems like something that's so available. You would think that there would be more measures in place to ensure that activity is curtailed, but in some of the locations, we may see the complacency sets in, and we have the violations. But the liquor civil penalty piece again will. It's not going to change the AVN component because the licensee will still have that standard in place, but it does change the impact for the first time sell, non-intentional of the person responsible for selling the product directly to the youth. So that's with the total amount of education hours and the total education contacts. That includes over the 120 enforcement education staff, which is the chemists, the examiners, the consultants, officers, and law enforcement staff at all levels. So that is everything. And I know, like our advertising and labeling individual, they're working regularly with industry members and providing quite a bit of education as well. So I didn't want that to go unnoticed and isolate it specifically to like the consultants and the officers. It's everybody is documenting the education that they're providing, and that's what I have.
Yeah, I was just curious about one thing on background checks for officer. What's the kind of rejection rate? Like is there a kind of standard like do most people get through? Do they not? I'm just sort of curious.
That's a great question. I would say most people don't necessarily get through.
Oh, okay.
I don't know the exact rate,
Yeah.
but we're pretty specific on the standard. So I'll get you that.
I'm curious. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll move to communications with Director Brian Smith.
Thank you, Chair Postman and Member Bollendroff and the rest of us here. Something you'd said, Paul, struck me as I forgot I'd got a media call that came in just before noon. And I was emailing the staff to follow up on that. So if you saw me emailing, that's all I was doing work. On the media side, it's been in all my years here, this has probably been the quietest 2 weeks that it's been. I guess maybe coming up. I know. But I got to report on the media stuff, and so very, very thankful for that. Just localized types of issues, and we'll even go a day without a call, which is extremely rare for us. But knock on wood, but I guess with some of the other things that's going on in the world, they have not focused on us. So, there some of the other key things you've heard me talk about before, but that are very important. We continue to make progress on the website work with our vendor. We meet with them weekly, and each week we have tasks to go back and work through, both on the IT end, from the communications end. We're going through quality assurance testing right now to make sure that our pages are going to be where they're supposed to be and that they're going to be linking up. There's been a couple of deadlines where we thought we were going to be going live. We have a drop dead date of into next year, which is in advance of the release 2 of SMP. We know we completely have to be done, but it shouldn't get anywhere near that. But due to some factors that are outside of kind of our control, it's been moved along. We're looking now at maybe an early to mid-December date, but we're going to know more, and we'll be sure to firm that up with everybody here and with folks, because we've been communicated externally that it's coming as well. So that. SharePoint Online, the internal stuff, you've seen your pages come through. Now you have a board page, thanks to all the work in the board office to help make that possible. And Sam on my team has been doing great work as we move through and plow through all of the pages that'll get up and get our intranet ready, which of course is valuable to our employees and how we get a lot of our information, et cetera. The annual report, we're in that time of year. So now we put out asking the divisions for draft content to supply that to me by yesterday. And most of the divisions have complied with that. So thank you very much for doing it. It'll be in our hands now to be able to try and edit, prepare that. Julie Graham on my team is already taking the lead, and she'll be editing through that. And our goal always is to get the annual report approved and posted online by the end of the year. So.
And Brent, you're taking care of the board and director's office piece.
I will.
Yeah.
And you guys will be involved in whatever I put together,
Yeah.
but I'll take the lead on that.
Great. Thank you.
Yep. And then since we didn't meet last time, we issued the fall newsletters. And so thanks again to the divisions that put all that content together, plus the original stuff, I guess, that we do. But we didn't meet in October, so you know that those went out. And like a lot of folks here, I think is just I'm busier this week working on our annual evaluations, our PDPs, et cetera. So focuses on that. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to address it. It's pretty much straightforward work from us right now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Policy, back to Justin Nordhoff. Yes.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So a number of things going on in the policy area. I'll start off with some of the rules that are kind of changing on some of the timelines. So the sampling rules, we had projected we were going to come and make a decision earlier. We're still working with stakeholders around some of the concepts that were identified in the public hearing. And so I think at this point in time, we're going to be preparing a supplemental CR 102. We'd rather have something that makes sure it's workable. So we've gotten some recent feedback also from operationalization from enforcement. So we want to make sure whatever we put into the rule can be utilized, and also talking with licensees about how this would work for them and their employees. So some of the concepts that we had in initially, we're reconsidering and trying to figure out if there's a pathway forward that makes the most sense. I think one of the strong points that I've shared with all of the different licensees and stakeholder groups when we're looking at sampling is to ensure that the amount of samples that are going to the employees, whether it's producer, processor, or retailer, is not so much that the state is condoning daily or near daily use. And so we're trying to really be mindful that we want businesses to succeed and operate so they can do quality assurance and those types of things and be educated on the product. But we recognize the employees may end up consuming daily, but we don't want to, as a state, I don't think it's in our best interest to put them in a position that it's facilitating daily or near daily use. And that's based on a lot of the public health conversations that we've had. And so I think folks have been understanding of that. Obviously that there's some interest points in a variety of areas to make sure that they can accomplish what they need to do. But I think that we're making headway, and with some of those changes and tweaks that we're talking about, it'll require that supplemental 102. The ESOP timeline, I'm pushing out just a little bit. So we were going to have our first stakeholder engagements in December. We're actually going to move that into the beginning of January. It gives us just a little bit more time. And I know that the AGs are looking for some expertise around this. And so we want to make sure that as we're developing the first parts of that rule package, that we have the best information as possible. But we are trying to do the first stakeholder engagement before legislative session starts. So we can have an idea of what the interest points are based on where we're at that particular point in time. I should go back on the sampling piece. One of the requests that we've had is to address R&D. That's really going to be a significantly different component beyond quality assurance, where people are developing products, not just making it and making sure that it's the same product consistently over and over. When they're developing product lines, I think the use of cannabis in that area is going to be significantly different than sampling. And so it really, we believe it's going to have to be a separate rule project at some point to address that.
Supplemental, this would take it even a further step.
It really would. And I think it'll make it overly complicated with trying to get the sampling rules completed. So we recognize that R&D is different. And I think that that's appropriate. And so we'll be having to look at that moving down. The other thing that we need to make sure that we've also worked and got some feedback around is the CCRS product types. There's been some discussion around changing those so it's easier to utilize in a number of areas. We want to make sure that whatever we put into this particular rule package can align with what we're talking about in the E&E area. So I wanted to make sure I touch base on that. So we've got a couple possible rules coming up. We had some questions around a couple of the pieces of legislation from last year that we're not doing rules on. And predominantly it's because we don't need rules. That's very specific in statute. So for example, the felony convictions related to mass permit holders, it's all called out specifically, and all we would be doing is repeating the statute in rule. It can be convenient to be able to do that for folks, so it's all in one place and they can find it easier. But with the amount of other projects and interest points that we have, I'm not moving it into a prioritization. And so I've told my team that we're not going to be doing rules on that particular issue, nor the civil penalty issue, because it's all specified in statute. There's really no need to put that into rule. If we do find down the road that there's a need, we're happy to re-explore that. But we have some. Yeah, we have some things that are coming up that I think would take priority. I mean, obviously, we've talked about what's kind of in the pipeline around, the ESOPs, product placement, and those types of things. But we also have had a couple of issues coming up around the pricing for cannabis for medical patients and how that's deviating at the point of sale to a higher price point than other customers. And so we did build in something at the end of a newsletter piece that was just one step. We're looking at what this looks like. I've talked with the AG's office a bit. I believe we do have some rulemaking authority in this area if we wanted to strengthen those and call out unfair or deceptive business practices as a regulation. And so there's some behind the scenes discussions before we even bring something formalized, but that's one that would take priority over some of the other things that I was just talking about from last year's legislation. The other one that comes to mind, and we've had this on and off over the years, and that's the transfer and assumptions of licenses. And there's an interest in having some stronger regulations to prevent the transfer or assumption of a license when there is something pending. For example, taxes. If we have a licensee that hasn't paid taxes and they owe the state a lot of money, not to just automatically let the license transfer and wipe the slate clean. So that's something that we've had discussions on and off. Sometimes it had been previously, in years past, had been around excessive amount of penalties, repeat violations, for example, and somebody would just try to shift it into a family member's name, to get out from under those types of things. I think we can build a lot of those provisions into a regulation so that we don't have a change in ownership to alleviate liability. So those are two of the ones coming up. We do have the public hearing coming up on the social equity program rules in December 4th. I'm not going to be at that board meeting, but I will jump online. I'll be at the conference, so I'm going to step out and make sure I'm on there in case there are questions. But I wanted to let both you and Jim know, and I'll be sure to let Ollie know that I'll be online if something happened to come up. Typically, we don't answer questions during public hearings, but prior or after, there may be a question or two. So packaging and labeling, I wanted to circle back on this because we had made some comments at the board meeting on the denial of the petition. And of course, we stand by the reasons on that, but we were talking about the alcohol warning. Yeah, the alcohol health warning. We actually learned a little bit more in the last couple of days. So, and I wanted to make sure that we correct some of the guidance. We were saying this needs to go through TTB, which yes, but, or I should say yes, and the FDA is also involved in any health warnings that are on the labels. And so TTB handles the bulk of the labeling, but there are provisions that the FDA would have to look at. And what we understand is if we were to actually change some of the health warning labels, not all labels, but the health warning labels on alcohol, it would actually take an act of Congress. And so that, even puts us in a worse position to deal with that. But I wanted to make sure so if folks are interested in exploring those health warnings, I think we need to have a larger strategy session on how we may want to approach this and potentially talk to our congressional delegation on what that would look like, if anything, and those types of things. So it's a little bit bigger than what we had initially kind of framed it as. So I want to make sure folks are aware of that.
Sort of explains to, I think it was Jim's question about how long has it been since, I mean, it was before Daniel was born. So clearly that is a tough road to go to Congress and fight the lobbying that would happen there. But I still think there's more information coming out every day about health impacts that there should be some place for discussing that. And
so, it seems like it's a little bit more challenging of a fix than just going to TTV. So I wanted to make sure that I commented on that. And so we also have had our first couple policy group discussions that have gone well. As a reminder, these are internal meetings that we're bringing people from all levels of the agency. We're having the directors provide names of participants before the meeting so we can keep the meeting size manageable. And then we're just having a discussion so we can try to learn perspectives before we ever engage in a rule development. So there's no decisions being made in those. It's just gathering that information. And it kind of goes back to this to the employee survey feedback on, I get to have input on decisions that are made. So before we even start going down a policy development, we're getting staff input on what does this look like? What are the different experiences? What are the perspectives? And so people will have a chance to share that, and hopefully that will give that sense of belonging and participation in some of the policy area development. So I think that's hopefully what we'll see as a result. We also have been working on, in the public health area, the high THC fact sheet, supporting Department of Health with the high THC signage that's required by the end of the year. And then Kristen's doing a great job around the hybrid engagement sessions. And she had shared that, there's a sense of, okay, we want to make sure that we're not taking up too much time, but let's have another meeting. So there's this level of excitement from the participants, and we actually had some folks volunteer for some almost subgroup type of homework assignments. So it's really encouraging to see that level of engagement, participation with our external partners. So a really nice job to Kristen on that. And then I'd also like to put a thank you out to Gretchen. In the transition with Dustin, she's been working with my team, trying to create some process improvements and flows, really good communication going on to make sure that things are in line and up to date for her to be able to post. And so really appreciate that level of communication, and just wanted to put out a thank you to her. So thanks.
Great. Thank you, Gretchen. Any questions for Justin? Okay, move to a general agency update with Deputy Director Tony Hood.
Thank you, Chair Postman, Member Vollendroff. Thank you. I'm going to start with an update about our systems modernization project. As always, it's on a tight schedule, but we are sticking to our schedule with currently the anticipated release date of March 31st, 2025. We have talked about a possible slide in schedule, but the time period we're talking about would be a 1-week slide to the right. So that is just a 1-week slide. We're trying to mitigate that so we could stick with our March 31st, but it's possible that we will have to move that. And Member Vollendroff, I haven't told you this directly, but we will have a 1-day time. We anticipate having a 1-day time period where our systems will be down, and we will be communicating this out to all of our stakeholders as we get closer. But the goal is to have that be on a Friday. So our cutover will happen on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so that we'll be back up and running on a Monday. And I did have a chance to meet with Chair Postman and discuss that briefly. But anyhow, that's the working plan right now. And again, we'll be working with communications who will probably tell me I shouldn't have said that right now. Like, why did you say it right now? You said it out of order. I said it out of order. So I realized that after I said it. But there we go. There's the transparency. I just said it. But we will continue to communicate many, many more details about that. And again, that would be in March or the beginning of April. We are, of course, working with Becky Smith, the head of licensing, who again is going to look at me like, why did you say that? Because she hasn't probably told her staff. I apologize.
I love this. You're just spilling all the secrets.
I apologize.
Go for it.
I don't mean to cause problems. I'm just trying to, as they say, socialize what may be coming. That's the magic word. I'm socializing the change that's coming. If I say it's socializing, it's not wrong, right?
Better than leaking.
Than leaking, yes.
Yeah.
I'm not putting my foot in my mouth if I'm socializing that way.
Is it transparent?
Okay, moving on to my next topic, strategic plan dashboard. Jessica Dang will soon be coming to EMT or a board meeting to show you our strategic plan dashboard. It's fabulous.
Oh, great.
And it runs on Power BI. It is, Mallory has configured it so that it can automatically update the information. It shows you where we are on our action items that have been assigned out, or that have actually not assigned out. Divisions have come up with their own action items for our strategic plan, and they report in as they're complete. This is a great dashboard that you can click around on and see where every division is at. You can see where we're at for the quarter, what we still have to do, what we still have to do for the entire plan. I'm very excited about it, and I'm excited for Jessica to come and show you how this all works. It's something we've never had before. We've never had a dashboard that was live like this that you could click around on. So that's internal. That's an internal dashboard, but very exciting for our staff and for us. You will also see the action items that we've already completed. I think that it's very important that we recognize that and celebrate the action items that we've completed. Sometimes those action items seem like regular work that we just do, and we don't recognize, hey, we made a plan and we accomplished it. We made a plan and we accomplished it. So I just want to make sure that at the right time we recognize those things. So my third item that I wanted to mention was our data governance work group. We are having a robust discussion at the management team level about our data governance. This is a work group or a committee that was restarted because of SMP. There's a lot of data that needs to transition over because of SMP, and we need to make sure that data is as clean as possible and stored properly. And so the Data Governance Committee is a group of people from all different divisions within the agency. and that is working on the proper rules that need to be in place regarding what data should be moved over and what business rules should be put in place relating to that data. For example, how long should it be retained? That's an important feature as we move to what is going to be called the data lake, which I think is hilarious, but anyhow. So in July, we'll go
Lake,
data lake,
like Lake Tahoe.
like Lake Tahoe. Yes, probably not as much fun as Lake Tahoe.
Never heard that phrase.
So in July, we will hopefully be all ready with our data lake, which will be beautiful and full of clean data. So drinkable,
Yeah.
crystal clear data. So we're working towards that. We're getting the business involved, not just IT, to make sure we have the right people explaining to us why do we need to keep this data? How long do we need to keep it? Not just the state retention rules, but what are our business needs for this data? So Rachel Swanner is the executive sponsor of that group, but we are having a lot of discussions, management team wide.
Quick question on the data. Is someone from the research group part of that?
Yes, absolutely. Sarah's in it.
Great. Excellent.
Yep, for sure. The next item I have is our strategic portfolio management, which the acronym is SPM. Just to be confusing, I think we need to have a new acronym for it, but if you see it somewhere, I just call it portfolio management.
Oh, so we have an SMP and an SPM.
Yeah, keeping us on our toes. Again, I call it portfolio management. I don't call it SPM, but if you see it somewhere. This is what's you've heard about before. It's being run by Jessica Dang and Mallory Hayes. This is what's run through the Decision Lens software when divisions believe that they have an agency-wide project that they want to go forward. They complete a form which has been designed by Mallory. They need to put a lot of information into that form. It is sent to management team to review, and management team is supposed to review it and ask any questions in advance of meeting altogether. The idea is to ask your questions in advance, get any data that you might need. Like if you want more data in order to rate it, because next Monday, we're going to have a meeting where we have 2 projects to talk about, and we get to rate them by using the system that we've developed. And the goal is to properly prioritize agency-wide projects. And that's all I have.
Okay, great. Okay, and then finally, our director, Will Keller.
Good afternoon, Chair Postman, Member Vollendroff. Just a few items. Been participating in meetings with state agencies and industry stakeholders on a variety of topics. Spending a lot of time with Member Vollendroff in the public health space, all throughout the state, being able to participate in discussions, hear about the research and hear the perspectives of what's going on in the public health community. Mark mentioned the budget exercise. It's going to be taking up a great deal of our time as we continue to work through that. When I'm not focusing on that, also working through the different transitions that are going on throughout Washington state government as a result of the most recent elections. And so now I'm going to be, transparent socialization.
Okay.
I'm going to take a minute and congratulate you on your appointment. And thank you for everything that you've done for the board, the agency, and myself.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, that's our last item. I'll just say, I think we got a caucus and board meeting next week, right? So I think, looks like that'll probably be my last week, last meeting next week. But I want to try to finish a couple of things, including the performance reviews for a couple of people who are owed those. And so I think I'll be here, probably through Wednesday, but we'll figure it out and I'll make sure everybody knows. Yeah, I won't take any more of our time now, but I'll try to I'll just save my farewells for next week sometime. So, but thanks, Will. Appreciate that. Okay, with that, we are adjourned and we'll be back Tuesday morning for a caucus. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.